about the traffic on that road? How has it changed in the last 5 or 6 years?
Certainly on the American side, taxis coming up after the buses had let people off at Plattsburgh, people walking up Roxham Road in the dark, sometimes pulling a suitcase behind them, minibuses leaving people at the bottom of Roxham Road, and groups of people walking up. So it's changed quite a bit. On the Canadian side is a lot of traffic, and it's RCMP traffic, because that site is fully staffed 24/7, 365 days a year. And then there's, of course, buses that are taking people who have crossed Roxham. They're being taken by the RCMP to the Lacal Border Service Agency. So a lot of traffic.
And the RCMP is there and they're active, but I would think that a lot of people might be worried or fearful living next to a place where 40,000 strangers a year are walking in without what they perceive to be proper checks. How do you feel about that?
Well, when in 2017, when a lot of Haitians started crossing, there was a little bit of concern that we heard from residents living on the road about, who are these people? Like, should we be worried about them? And the United Church actually organized a public information session that was super helpful, because people really started understanding locally the context of why these people were crossing and what their intent was. I think there's more a concern, and it goes beyond Hemmingford. There's a concern, obviously, that people are getting more and more into this not in my backyard kind of thing. Like, why are people coming, and why the high numbers, which I'm going to argue are not high numbers based on the global situation, but that's what we're hearing more from people.
What happens then to the people that cross? The RCMP are there, but as you said, it's not an official crossing. So what kind of process do they go through?
Well, they show up, and the RCMP tries to tell them to stop and listen, which not everyone's doing anymore, because they've watched the videos and they know the protocol, and so some of them actually try to rush over that tiny little path that's being created. They used to have to go through a ditch, now there's a tiny little path. And the RCMP basically tell them that they're entering Canada illegally, which we will continue to argue with the RCMP. United Nations is very clear. It's an irregular entry. People have a right to do it. And then they're told that they'll be arrested. And they cross. Their suitcases are moved to one side. Papers are handed over to the RCMP officers, and they're taken into the building, and that's where the beginning of, I guess I would call it processing, happens. They're checked, and then they're driven to Lacal, where they're officially processed, and that's where it gets checked. If there's any concern about a criminal record or something that's sketchy, they get sent to a detention center. Most of them are put on buses and sent to Montreal, where the community organizations work on housing, getting them their paperwork, and helping them start to get settled while their request for asylum is being processed. So it's quite a big process, a lot of moving pieces.
You mentioned earlier the number of refugees there are globally right now. You live relatively close to this crossing, and you're part of this group of people who decided in 2017 to become organized and to help asylum seekers as they cross the border. Why did you feel compelled to do all of that?
When you see something going on so close to your house, you can kind of get called to action, and a lot of us were called to action to do something because we saw the humanity of the people crossing and felt that they had a right to be treated in a dignified way. And respectfully.
When you hear the news about the New York City mayor buying bus tickets for asylum seekers to get to Plattsburgh, do you think that that's dignified or respectful?
No, I think he's passing the buck, and that's what lots of people do. That's what's been going on, ever since we've had refugees. So we've got to stop passing the buck and actually get at the root cause of the problem. Roxham Road is one very small piece, as we all know, of the world global refugee reality. And so trying to solve things by giving people bus tickets to go to Plattsburgh is not an answer. There's certainly an answer that the Canadian government could do by revoking the Safe Third Country Agreement and letting people pass safely, humanely, adequately protected at official ports of entry. And then there's obviously lots of work that could be done at the international level to address the environmental, economic, war reasons that we have so many displaced people.
But the mayor of New York obviously feels enormous pressure right now because of the refugee crisis that they perceive in their city. Given what's happening right now in New York, what do you think the summer and spring have in store for you and your community?
It has an effect for Bridges Not Borders. It has an effect for our sister organization, Plattsburgh Cares in the States. And it has an effect for all the groups in Montreal as more and more people possibly start coming over. We're there in the winter with hats and mitts and scarves, and we're running out of them, and we'll just run out of them more. We're there in the summer with water. We'll be running out of that more if there's more people. The impact for us is quite small. I'm more concerned about the broader impact of our system being able to grow quickly enough to process those claims and meanwhile support people in terms of housing and all of that's needed.
Frances Ravensbergen, thank you very much for talking to us. It was nice to speak to you today.
You're welcome, Brent.
Frances Ravensbergen lives near the border crossing at Roxham Road, where she volunteers with a group called Bridges Not Borders. Even if you haven't watched that movie in the past 2 decades, I'll bet you knew exactly what that scene is. Jack and Rose perched on the rails at the bow of the Titanic, leaning into each other's arms, spread as though they're soaring through the air. It's romantic, it's iconic, it's, okay, with the benefit of hindsight, it's kind of cheesy. But for writer Anne T. Donahue and many, many others,